Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another amazing episode of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential, and together we can change the world. If this is your first time listening, welcome to this amazing growing community. Go ahead and subscribe. Hit that notification button so you won't miss any great content. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Randy Herbertson. Randy is the brand strategist, creative director, and the owner of an amazing company called The Visual Brand. He has a strong expertise in social media, digital innovation, hacking, industrial, and environmental design. Please help me welcome Randy with building a creative brand. This is Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness.
I really started my journey in school having an odd double major of graphic design and business. Wow. So it sort of led me to that right brain, left brain orientation that as a Gemini I come by naturally. And led me into my career. The common thread has been working on new products and services. So essentially innovation is sometimes used, although that's a word like marketing that's overused. So I like to say new products and services. Everybody knows what that is. Working on the client side, working on the media side, working in the big agency side. And about 16 years ago, I started my first independent agency when I finally decided that it was time to stop working for somebody else and to do it on my own.
So you said you have a degree in graphic designer. Wow.
Graphic design and business. So I got a double major. So where that really leads is that any kind of, frankly, good marketing work, you always should have a strategic answer to all the whys before you do your creative work.
Right.
Makes both easier, frankly. And so that was sort of always my orientation. And I really, over the years, particularly with my own agencies, have built a practice around that, the tools around that, to make it also simple. It's funny, I usually go back to my tortured time as a brand manager, all the things that I hated doing that I thought were stupid, and figured out ways to do them in a more useful way. And one example of that is every brand manager knows the death of doing a brand plan every year. It's a big tome with a lot of information that nobody ever reads after you nervously present it to the board the first time, and then it's done. And so sort of reinvented that into a 12-page, very usable document that starts any brand off with any new initiative or certainly any new company. And it's a tool, we've refined over the years many, many times, but it's a very simple, actively used tool. And beyond being something that's really usable, it's something that really creates consistency, but at the same time creates conversation and unified direction between a client and an agency or anything they're working with. Interestingly, one of the greatest sort of defining lessons that I learned happened when I was actually worked in the big agency world. And I had the fortune of being in a group that said, you get to have an executive coach for 6 weeks. So I said, great. So I worked with a woman by the name of Ellen Meyer, who was brilliant. And she taught me something that I have probably, if I was Malcolm Gladwell, I'd be writing a book about it. I did it in an article. And ultimately, it's been a tool I've used every single day. And it's what I've called your creative thinking DNA, which is essentially how are you oriented to create information, process information, and interact with others. And it has to do with whether you're a matrix thinker, a linear thinker, are you a fast processor, or are you a considered processor, and the way those things work together. And the reason that it's important is not only does it helps you understand how you work, and we all have adaptive behavior that we do whatever our style is, but really importantly, how you work with others. So for example, I'm a matrix thinker and I'm a fast processor. So fast processor, I think of ideas really fast. They come out of my mouth really fast. I'm not naturally a great listener. So adaptively, I've learned to be an active listener. So sometimes in a way, I write things down instead of spitting them out, because as a fast processor, you're also worried about losing them. And I really learned to be a good listener. On the other side, I'm also a matrix thinker, which means I'm a multitasker naturally. I've got 12 things open on my desktop. And under stress, of course, the pieces fly. So adaptively, you learn, and also you tend to have high level ideas and that you're not into the details. And so I know I complement really, really well with somebody who's very detail oriented. And again, I every interview I've ever done for anybody, I've always asked those two questions, and I design my teams around a combination, because really it's not about all having one kind of thinker or one kind of person. It's having people that have a blend of those things that make a better whole.
Wow. That's really interesting. How long did it take you to discover that about yourself?
Well, honestly, I did this with Ellen initially, and it was such a mind blow. Did it slightly differently, but it was such a mind blower that I thought about it and I went, oh, this is it. It took me about a decade to write the article. Finally had the opportunity to do it. And but actually, interestingly, one of the things I've also done throughout my career is I've been an adjunct professor and lecturer at a lot of schools, and it was a lecture before it became an article. Because again, the same thing, the way I position this, and I usually lecture or teach in graphic design schools, is one of the things that a lot of young designers usually aren't great communicators. Not always true, but it's stereotypically not true. And so part of how do you communicate, whether it's to a boss or a client or anything else, became a great tool. So we utilized that and moved on from there.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. It's really interesting. I mean, it's really what you're saying right now is really resonating with me. Why is this important for you to know exactly what type of thinker you are, and how can this benefit you when you're working with someone else?
So for starters, I think if you understand your style and you recognize it, and we all sort of know it inherently because we adaptively do other things to when our style isn't working. So I think it makes you as an individual a more productive person for starters. But the reality is very few of us work in a vacuum. We always have to work with other people or have the opportunity to work with other people. So again, and I find when you are, and it's even having the courtesy. So as a matrix thinker, if I'm talking to a linear thinker who basically doesn't want to start something else until they finish the first thing, instead of flipping off to another subject, I ask permission. Okay, is it okay for us to move on now? We're not done, but I'm ready to be done for a minute. And even that permission gives the other person the respect that they want and allows them to be prepared to do exactly what you want to do. And sometimes they'll say, no, can we do a little bit more? And we do it. So I think it creates more productive, just more courteous and just better kinds of relationships between people. And particularly in the work that we do, both strategically and creatively, it's essential. Because again, we're at our best in a collaborative environment. This past year was challenging when we were doing that more virtually because collaborative environments don't tend to be linear, but we made it work. But it's really essential. And again, when I see that working, it's magic. Because again, people come out with creating things that have joint ownership, but at the same time have joint talent and input that make them even better.
For myself, I love to go to places like Starbucks. I'm in the office right now, and it's just me in this office, other than seeing you on the screen. But I'm in this office by myself. There's no way I can study. And if I'm trying to do creative thinking, I have to go to a place that's busy like Starbucks. And it's so crazy because everything is going around me, but it's like I'm zoned in. Now I'm able to focus with all this stuff going on. And people think I'm nuts for being that way because it's just so different and seems so crazy. What's your thought on that? Or how are you?
So you've just completely described matrix thinking. Okay. So the same thing with me, Cedric. I have a sound. I've turned off my music right now in the studio, which by the way is lo-fi. We want it to be there and creating energy. And I'm actually very into the whole environment here, which maybe you see behind me, whether it's the lighting and the sound and everything. But that's, same thing for me. Dead silent room, I can't concentrate. Cannot concentrate, need multiple things. And it's funny what I even, have my team that I know the same way. They've got a podcast going on while they're working and it's not distracting them. It's helping to focus them. Yeah. So, we learned that about this. Now, and some people, the opposite is true. There's people down there with noise deadening headphones and need to listen to silence because that works better for them. But again, it's again, understanding that that's not bad. That's just the way you work best. Well, so, the truth is of all that is, there are degrees of everything. Probably as matrix thinkers, we are a little ADHD. The reality is, but truthfully, if we're functioning, doesn't need to be medicated.
Right. Yeah.
Like anything to the nth degree. I mean, some of these two linears, OCD, right? No. They're so focused. So that's the extreme end of the linear thinker. So there are just ranges on every chart. And look at, and the interesting part of this too is when we're forced to do the opposite. Like we're forced to go straight through things because we're on deadline and it has to get done. And we're like, don't want to do this, but you can. You can do it. And you get done with it, you go, I'm glad I don't have to do that way every time. But when you do it, hey, I can do it.
That is awesome. Thank you, Randy. Thank you. So let's move on to what you do. Let's talk about the visual brand. What inspired you to begin this journey and why?
So this is again my sequel to my first company that I started in New York City.
Mhm.
Actually, interesting story because I at the time before that I was in the big agency world, and had my level of success, and had executive coaches and stuff like that. But I finally sort of decided that I was tired of doing this for somebody else. I just said, the politics of working in a big place and all that kind of stuff. So I decided to leave, and fortunately, I have a very understanding wife who says, yes, I know we have kids and we have a mortgage, and I'm going to quit my job. And I hired, or actually joined with, a partner who I was actually trying to hire at the time at this other company. And he had said, yeah, I'd rather just do something on my own than work for a big agency. So we did it. And then this is again, about 7 years ago, I sold the previous one, and like I said, way before COVID, decided to stop commuting and moved my business close to home and started the same thing, and made it work here. What we have always been, and is like I said, a new products and services company. But at the core, we have a team of what we call creative strategists and design people. And they work together very hand in hand. They work on things separately, but we work with very big companies in their innovation groups or marketing groups or things like that, usually a lot on when they're working on something new. And then we work with emerging companies as well. And the balance of both is not only healthy, it's more fun and interesting. We are always working on a combination of both. And what we're doing with them is really, and in the perfect world, is always people have a great idea, but then don't know of all the other pieces. What are the core elements of your brand? We call brand drivers. Who is your audience, and not just who's your demographic, but why is your audience going to like this brand based on what your drivers are?
Wow.
And then what's your brand personality? And even right down to what is your vocabulary? We literally help you develop a vocabulary of words or words you use very consistently that become part of your, as we call it, communication code. So going through all that stuff, and it's not a 4-month process. It doesn't take terribly long. I said it's 12 pages long when it's done. And that leads us into, when we do it, and usually we lead into the next step, is anything creatively. Doesn't matter if we're creating a logo or creating a package or creating a video or whatever we happen to be doing from there, but we have a starting point. And so, my team is, besides the creative strategy team, is made up of designers that are every flavor, graphic designers, digital designers, 3D designers, 2D designers, video team, photography. So we have a little bit of all of that on the team. The one fun thing too of being a small place for 20 people is I like hiring people that have multiple things they're good at. So like one of my creative strategists is also a photographer. So he does both for us. One of my video editors was also, happens to be a great copywriter. So he does both. We have different people who have multitask jobs that they do. And there's some people that are pretty specific, like our 3D motion team is that's pretty much what they do. But again, even they will sometimes get pulled into something that's outside of their comfort zone. So like when we do what we call brand identity or logo work, I have the entire design team work on an idea. Based on your orientation, they'll do something different. And we do what we call group crits together. And it becomes not only a great exercise to get diverse ideas, it's a really great team building exercise as well. Because, in the perfect world, I look down on my floor and people are exchanging and interacting and working together and consulting with each other. They're not just sitting in their cube or their desk and doing it by themselves. Because not only is that lonely and kind of boring, it doesn't get the best results.
Man, I love it. I love it. I love it. I even love it. Is this your office you're sitting in?
Yes. So we are at a converted post office. So it's a very old building. Actually, I've got beautiful tin ceilings up here, and I'm actually sitting up in a little loft part that the floor down below is about 20 feet, and we have a couple rooms beyond that. But our big photo and collaboration room and a few others. But I love this space, which was a little bit unusual even for the town we're in. Because I'm into what I call rest-novation, which is restoring old things but making them new. And so and the only other funny thing is that and I've always actually had interesting locations to good fortune, but usually I always took the worst office. I thought, oh, you guys all have the good things. And this time, this was going to be a conference room. And I thought, no, it's not. It's going to be my office. So I said, I can have the good office. So I'm a little bit of the overlord here. But one thing purposely, my screen is pointed out to them. So I'm not like a big privacy. I've got a big window. And so I'm not hiding anything. So everybody can see what I'm doing.
It is so amazing. I see this window behind. I see this setup. As soon as you came on, I'm like, wow, this is pretty awesome. I love your setup, man. It definitely, again, I mean, it's like everything. This is so amazing. I mean, speaking of branding, I mean, it's just so amazing. I mean, everything, your setup, the people you work alongside. I mean, it's everything is based on the culture of who you are as an individual. And I think that is so amazing.
Thank you.
And then you said something that I do want to acknowledge. You said you always, I mean, this is a whole nother subject, servant leadership, whether you normally thinking about everybody else more than you think about yourself, which we may be able to touch on that today if we have time, but you still have a big majority of people that don't lead like that. It's like, it's all about them, but being in that position where you're that servant leadership, where I'm leading to serve, I'm leading to make somebody else's life better, and all of us life getting better together. I mean, it's so amazing. I love what you're doing, man. I love it.
Thank you. Well, I will tell you, and just speaking to environment too. And by the way, I don't ever call this space an office. I always call it a studio because I like the creativity of that. But I do pay great care to, like I said, the environment of the studio, not just for me. And look at my office, as you can see, it's also, we meet in here all the time, and blah blah blah. But it's both, it's the sound, it's the lighting, it's everybody's in a common space for the most part, but they have space around them. So we had social distancing before that was a thing. So people don't feel like they're crowded and cramped, but at the same time, they still feel they're in an environment that they can work on together. Because you want people to also, when they come into a space, to feel that it is comfortable and inspiring at the same time. If you're going into space with fluorescent lights and your energy is drained. I wanted you to walk in here and feel lifted a little bit and feel inspired and feel good and not feel like I'm going into work. So, and that's what I feel, honestly. I come in and feel like, oh yeah, this is a nice environment and I feel comfortable in here, and it works. We also have lots of pets here too, by the way. We have 3 dogs roaming around here. So we're very pet friendly. Yes.
I love this, creating your own work environment. I love what you said. You said we don't call it an office, we call it a studio. And this is getting to, I want to dig on it. You brought it up and I want to dig on it. You said communication code. What lessons or advice would you give to someone wanting to learn about building a communication code regarding the branding audience?
Communication code is really having, frankly, by the way, it's not just words, but it's definitely words. We're actually big into information design too. It can be iconography, it's, blah, blah, blah. But what happens when you have a communication code, it becomes your shorthand with your audience. It's how they get to know you, right? And so when you use words or have symbols or things, use them in a certain way, once they see, they just go, check, I know what that means for you. But it doesn't mean the same thing necessarily for everybody. I'll give you an example. We're literally working on a innovation right now for a big packaged foods company. And a word that we have in the vocabulary is choice, but choice, not in the sense of it's your choice in the sense of it's like a choice cut. It's a choice. It's good. It's better. So when we use it that way, that's the only way we'll use it. Okay. So if you hear that word, then you'll go, okay, I get it. So it's being mindful of that. And then, by the way, those come from somewhere. They didn't just come out of the blue. We've chosen because they're connected to, our brand personality and connected to even our drivers on the things. And the drivers are basically functional, emotional things that are important to us. So as every brand, you have a small set of things that are important to you, and those becomes your starting points. So essentially, you can backtrack them. And then when you create the communication code, and it's 20 words. Obviously, it's great on a website because it's got SEO, but beyond that, it becomes things you say regularly in your phrase and how you talk about yourself as a brand. So it's important because, again, it's all about what people speak back about who you are. So if they say, yeah, that's a really choice brand, okay? So then that means it's a good brand. not like I chose to do it, as an example. And sometimes Brilliant says, oh, that's really cool, but where did that come from? Why is that important? Why, yes, people know the words because it's a slogan or whatever, but don't know why it's important. So that's what I think is most important, is understand where it fits in for you.
We're talking about communication code, and you already said that it's not just words. I mean, everything you do, you're talking about your brand. And not only you're talking about your brand in words, your brand is in the office. It's everything. It's in the furniture. It's in the lights. It's in the sound. It's in the dogs roaming around. You don't really have to tell me anything about I'm talking about before telling me, explaining anything. You don't have to say it. The environment speaks for itself. It's like the walls are talking. It's like the carpet is talking. It's like the chairs behind you is talking. It's like everything around the building is just talking, and you don't have to say a word. How did you do that?
So, it's an iterative process, Cedric. And again, I find also it comes from capturing and capitalizing on different inspirations. My wife actually is a creative person as well, and she works for a pilot division of a huge company. She's actually a stylist and natural designers, which she is.
Wow, that's awesome.
And so the place where she works it's a retail location, though what her job is really to create the environment there, and they make things that the company sells. So, but there's an aesthetic to that I really love, and I knew actually I put in her portfolio when this company opened here, because I said you're going to want to live there. and so that's really a lot of my aesthetic sort of for this office or studio was sort of born out of that. Now I've taken it beyond that, but it started there. So it's got them understanding the things that you love, and then again you have to make a decision of what you are. You're this versus that. But even frankly, having a nice looking studio was important to me, not certainly absolutely for my employees, but frankly it's also for clients too. So when they come and see this, just like you said, they get a sense of who we are, and how we work and what our brand is. It's always good to start with a template. In other words, don't start from scratch, especially if you haven't done this before. And there's lots of ways to learn about that and read, how to do that. And I find by templates, there are simple exercises that help you to get to a goal. But ultimately, the most important brand strategy, I think, is that it has to all connect. So depending on whatever you're doing, whatever way you are facing whoever your consumer or customer is, you've got to have a consistency in who you are all the way through. One of my favorite stories, my first brand management job was with a very huge wine company based in California, and they sold pretty cheap wine. Okay. And you'd go into a store and you'd find it in big jugs and people bought it and it was great. But we spent millions of dollars on really fancy upscale commercials, and they were beautiful and they were great, but they would say there's a disconnect here. Okay. You're going in and paying, $6.99 for a gallon of wine. And yet I'm seeing these, lush, luxe, blah, fancy dinner parties. Like, it's just not connected. Doesn't, but again, the owner said, oh, this is who we have to be as a brand. So it's understanding who you are, and funny enough, we had in that company too, a wine cooler brand that we launched that was very successful. They chose the opposite idea, wildly successful, not only because the market took off, but because we just didn't pretend we were something other than we were. So, so that's, I think, is probably the best strategy, is just to really have it all connected from every touch point, from start to finish. You also see really successful companies even take that through if they have a customer service element, that customer service element completely fits in the rest of their brand, that it works the same way, that if whoever your personality is, make sure that whoever is, dealing with a consumer or customer is using the same thing. Because the same thing, like, wow, I think this is a really cool brand, but oh my God, I had this weird experience, this really aggressive experience with this spa brand, So it's just being mindful of every touch point. Being authentic is one of the most important things anybody can do. But authentic doesn't mean one thing. It just means being authentic to you, And by the way, honestly, some instances authentic for certain people we don't all like necessarily, right? And by authentic, it doesn't mean being disrespectful or, hurtful to others. That's not authentic. But, having different points of view is okay, if you understand that, and I think that's what being authentic is being true to you and following your own path, and do it the way that you want to. And by saying to do it the way you want to, we learn from others. So it's not like the old my way is the highway. So yes, we may have a great way of doing things, but if also you're not a constant learner and seeker, then you don't grow. I have, again, like lots of things I've done a certain way and then been inspired and all of a sudden done it in a different way or evolved it into a different way because I've learned something from somebody.
Speaking of that, what characteristics, values, and qualities do you feel every great leader should have?
Well, I'll start with the place that I told you that I have to really work on is being an active listener.
Yeah.
That is, a lot of great leaders are great speakers, but I think the real magic is being an amazing listener. And by listening, I will say, let's call it visual and verbal listening, because visual listening is just as important as to whether it's seeing how reaction to people, to the things that are in our world. I think both are really, really important. And I think the other big one is to don't have the arrogance to think that you can't learn something new every day and apply it to what you do. So no matter how successful you are, you're going to learn things to be more successful if you watch and observe, and back to being a good listener, visual and verbal, and adapt what you do.
Yeah. Speaking of that, that's so amazing. What I, did some research on Bill Gates, and this man still reads hundreds of books every year, always trying to learn more and more and more.
So I think you pointed to one thing: read. Read a lot, whatever you're reading. I have a whole separate life of pro bono and nonprofit work that I do too. But one of the things that I do is I am a trustee for a really beautiful library here that's an amazing place. And one of my favorite parts about it, at the beginning of every board meeting, everyone's supposed to say, "What are you reading now?" And it's always giving your hit list of things to look at. And honestly, because it's a diverse board, things I would never occur to read come up, and I go, "Oh, that's kind of cool," and then I'll read it and go, that was really worth my time. I never would have picked that up. Wow. So I think that's really, really, really important. I think the other useful tip would be two things. Number one is use your time effectively throughout the day, but also give yourself permission to have downtime. So I think a lot of times as leaders, you'll feel like, hey, downtime's a waste of time. Can't have it. There are times that every day everybody has to have downtime. And that doesn't mean I'm doing chores instead of working. That's not downtime. No. It's doing something completely waste of time, not necessarily for 12 hours, but for a little bit of time is restorative and good. And probably the very last thing, which is not a thing that too many people don't say, but I had to learn the hard way, which is get enough sleep. So I used to commute to New York City every day. I did for over a decade. And I got very, very used to having 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night, just because stay up late, get up early, get on a train, work all day, 3-hour commute home between everything. And it was just thick. And so I got used to sleep deprivation. And, one of the big changes when I moved my business closer is, oh my God, I'm not commuting 3 hours a day, and I can use that time somewhere else and sleep. And again, I think the power of restorative sleep is huge. And we all know those times when we don't get it. We truthfully go, you know what? I'm just tank half full here. Not just because I'm tired, as my brain isn't clicking. You sort of say, oh, I can't remember. I'm so tired. It's because your brain's not working.
Your brain trying to sleep while you're up. What are you reading now?
I'll be really embarrassed to say at this moment, I'm not reading anything. I'm about to go on it's funny. I always kickstart again when I travel, which has been rare. I'm going on my first real trip vacation in a couple of weeks, actually overseas. Wow. My wife and I are, and I'm going to collect some things to read for that, because who wants to watch airplane movies, right? So, but again, like I said, there are seminal things that I read and reread. Like I said, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow a number of years ago, and I just reread it. There's a book by Robert Reich, who was Bill Clinton's Secretary of Commerce, I think, which I just read. It's called Not the Good Thing, but something like that. Anyways, his whole point is finding that point of collaboration and agreement. That's the whole point of this book. It's so timely for us these days, is where you can feel fiercely this way, but find those places where you join together. And that is your starting point to move forward. You can still have things that are different, but find those places where you're together. And actually build those on mutual respect. And I read that, it was a few months ago, and it was I do honestly, the other part too, I say I'm not reading books right now. I read a lot every day. I read a lot of blogs. I read a lot of, columns. I read a lot of things just because I think it's important to continue, not just to be current, it's also to learn new things. I'm a big Quora guy. I love Quora because I love digging in there and learning stupid facts that sometimes aren't stupid facts. They're like, oh my God, that's important.
Right.
I have a very busy day. I'll take 20 minutes out of the day in different pieces to read things like that because it actually kind of, moves me forward.
Yeah. Do you do your reading in the morning or in the evening?
So when I'm reading books, it's usually the evening. My mornings are, again, time because I'm trying to maximize my sleep between working out and doing all the other things. I do have a very disciplined morning before I get into the studio and try to get everything in there. So, but yeah, so it's an evening. Again, for me, my wasted time, I don't even necessarily call that wasted time. That's productive time. It comes in the evening. So, and that's the other thing too, is the old classic, which we're all, for those working remotely or having a hard time doing this, which is leave work at work. There's a point where, I'll even stay here a little bit longer if I need to, just to know that I'm going to go home and not work. By the way, it's also everything I've chosen to get done today. You're never done. Okay. There's always more that you need to do, but you have to choose to be done for the day. And not go, oh my God, I'm going to have to read those 25 emails when I get home. We're going to have to finish that project or whatever. You make a decision on, and by the way, it has to be a responsible decision. It has to be, is this okay if I'm choosing to be at this point today? And again, if you're not, there's something wrong with your time management or your delegation or collaboration that is causing that to happen.
Randy, a knowledge bomb to go. This is awesome. What an amazing podcast. Really enjoyed having you on. If someone wanted to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
Our website is thevisualbrand.com. I'm Randy, R-A-N-D-Y, at thevisualbrand.com. Also, if you want to check out my blog, it's called mymovingforward.com.
Awesome. On behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, we want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us.
Pleasure to be here, Steve.
And don't forget to subscribe to Lead to Greatness if this is your first time. And this podcast was helpful to you, leave a big thumbs up. And also, I want you to check out our Marriage Coach podcast, the podcast with my wife and I. If you're on iTunes, please rate this podcast and leave a review and help get the word out. Again, thank you, Lead to Greatness Nation, for joining us on today. Looking forward to seeing you again on next week. Till then, remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace. We out.